So the next question is, what do you need to write? Well, in the commentary you get 10 single-spaced pages, including the prompts, and that will also include any graphs or tables that you put in there as well. Excuse me. And you'll have also your assessment that you used. No errors in that. That's an automatic one. You have to make sure everything is actually accurate, no typos and stuff like that. And then if you have anything that you need to supplement your materials with, either conversations you have with a student, if you give feedback to students orally, or you have a whole class discussion about it, that would be something great to include about how you've analyzed the data and noticed several problems with student learning. Even better if you can specifically create different groups of students with different problems and address those one at a time. So the first task is to analyze student learning. So you want to look at the learning objectives, and again, you should have assessments aligned with those learning objectives. Second, you provide a graphic, table, or chart, or narrative, I would put in both definitely, that summarizes student learning for the whole class. Again, this is the whole class analysis. In general, how did they do? And not just how did they do overall, how did they do in each objective? And you should have an assessment that lets you break things down according to objective, because then it lets you identify and diagnose exactly where the problems are, and it gives you a good insight to how you can make it better next time and how you can improve these students' learning this time around. Part C, use evidence found in the 3 student work samples and the whole class summary to analyze the patterns of learning for the whole class and differences for groups of individual learners relative to this essential literacy strategy and related skills. Right, so basically B and C together is this idea of, okay, I have these different problems and these different successes in the whole class. I'm going to identify several different patterns that exist, and I'm going to use my 3 student work examples to demonstrate or provide a concrete context for what exactly that looked like. So you'll say, so I've noticed that some students had a problem with constructing or breaking down the different parts of an argument. For example, student 1 did ... and then you go on and have a discussion about that. Other students, however, did not have a problem with that, illustrate that the success in this other student, but they had this kind of problem, and so on. And so you break it down again. The essential literacy strategy is the longer term goal. The related skills are those component things. So you should be looking at, people who get everything in the essential literacy strategy did everything well. But people who didn't do it, they failed for one or more reasons, and that's where you break it down into the related skills. Again, talk about what they do well and where they continue to struggle. Talk about strengths and weaknesses. That is very important in this thing, and it's very important when you talk to students. I know that I have sometimes I forget to do the whole what everyone's doing well, because that's just when you go through the whole PhD thing, you just become a hypercritical person about everything. And so it's something that we need to remind ourselves to do. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're just a natural at it. Probably. So maybe you won't have to worry about that. But just in case, pay special attention to always focusing on some positives, not just the negatives. And then D, if a video or audio work sample occurs in group context, right? Again, they suggest that actually the assessments that you have give you individual data, but if you are giving feedback in a whole group session, or you are doing some portion of the assessment in a whole group session, then you should definitely include that along with the text that you have. Now, if we look at the rubric that goes with this, how does the candidates analyze evidence of student learning related to the essential literacy strategy and related skills? Level 3, right? This is what you're going for. Analysis focuses on what students did right and wrong. They asked you to do that. I don't know why you wouldn't. Again, the bar is set pretty low. And the analysis includes some differences in whole class learning. So you were able to see some patterns They're not even asking for a lot here. This is one of those things where I think a level 4 is a no-brainer. Level 4, analysis uses specific examples from work samples to demonstrate patterns of learning consistent with the summary. Exactly what I was just talking about before. Identify your patterns first, then pick out your students and use them as concrete examples to demonstrate what those patterns are. And the second part here, and the patterns of learning are described for the whole class. Okay, now actually, this is not like the ideal thing. If we look at 5, analysis uses specific evidence from work samples to demonstrate the connections between quantitative and qualitative patterns of learning for individuals or groups. So again, now we're not just talking about the entire class. Now I'm breaking it down into, here are my strong students, here are my weak students, here are my ELL students, here are my students with some language challenges or lower vocabularies or just lack of content knowledge, here are my visual learners, here are my audio learners, and so on. And I can break it down into a whole bunch of different ways, right? But ultimately, it lets me see a clear picture of where everyone's at and what I can do about it. When they talk about, usually there's a question about the difference between quantitative and qualitative patterns. Quantitative refers to numbers, right? And when we talk about quantitative patterns, we're really talking about scoring and the number of errors. When we talk about qualitative patterns, what we're really talking about are the kinds of errors, right? So we both got a 50%, me and Susie, right? The question is, what was the quality of our work like? Did we make the same mistakes or did we make different mistakes? And so while quantities deal with numbers and amounts, qualities deal with characteristics. And that is what you really definitely want to focus on along with those numbers. Use the numbers as a jumping off point, but then focus in on, well, what kind of problem is it, or what kind of strength is it, right? And then have a conversation between basically you and the reader about what exactly is going on. One-sided conversation, of course. You'll be doing all the talking. But think of it that way, like you're telling somebody, this is what's going on in my classroom. This is how it is for the whole class, and this is how it breaks down among different groups of people.